City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded January 6, 2025.
I have 6 o'clock. We will call the regular Plan Commission meeting to order. Maria is usually here to take a roll.
I can take a roll.
Are you doing roll now?
Yep.
Okay, so could you please do that roll?
I certainly can, Mayor. Mayor Wiesa.
Here.
Alderperson Kneebone.
Here.
Commissioner Artson.
Here.
Commissioner Beacom.
Here.
Commissioner Muskowiak.
Here.
Commissioner Rice.
Here.
Commissioner Schuler.
Here.
Everyone is here, and we will move forward. Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to 2025.
That's right. First one.
This is the first one, all right? The first of many. We'll probably have about a dozen of these over the course of the year. Item number 2 is the report of the December 2nd, 2024 Plan Commission. Those minutes and actions were included in your packet.
I'd move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is a public hearing and then subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend the Chapter 23 zoning ordinance of the revised municipal code of the City of Stevens Point. The request amends Section 23.04 Sub 2 for the purposes of amending the definition of household entity and household entity plus as follows. A household entity is an individual or 2 or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, foster child arrangement, or similar legal relationship, and functioning as a single housekeeping entity, or such individual or person plus 2 individuals and their dependents not having such similar legal relationship, but functioning as part of a single housekeeping entity. The definition of household entity shall not apply to a tourist rooming house. Household entity plus will be defined as an individual or 2 or more persons related by blood, marriage, adoption, foster child arrangement, or similar legal relationship and functioning as a single housekeeping unit, or such individual or person plus 3 individuals and their dependents not having such similar legal relationship but functioning as part of a single housekeeping entity. The definition of household entity plus shall only apply to owner-occupied dwellings, and the definition of household entity plus shall not apply to a tourist rooming house. If you recall, we had talked about increasing the number of unrelated people last month at the request of Alderperson Christensen. We brought it back to staff for further consideration. Before you is changing those definitions, which will in effect allow 3 unrelated people in a dwelling unless it's owner-occupied, and then it would allow 4 unrelated people in an owner-occupied. Before we open the public hearing, are there any questions on the definitions? Yes, sir.
Not on the definitions, but I don't know if I can ask a question about the chart that is on page 7 of the packet for the other communities.
Let's do that after the public hearing.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, with that, I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony, step to the lectern. Name and address for the record, please.
Greg Hansel, 3524 Regent Street, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I feel like a bad penny because I think it's the 4th time I've talked to you all about this. I'm in favor of the change, and I think when this first started a couple years ago, the concerns that we heard were number one, that would cause a lot of issues if you raise the limit at all. And I think that one of the last meetings we were at, there weren't any issues with raising the home owner-occupied one. That seemed to be fine. We also talked about doing this gradually, and I think we are doing it gradually. I think you've done a good job taking your time and thinking about it. So I think this would be a small step in helping alleviate some of the issues we have with housing in the community. So I'm in for it, and thank you very much. And I'm not leaving because I don't like you, but I have to go to another meeting.
Sure, Greg, thanks. Public hearing remains open. Andrea?
Andrea Olson, 410 Franklin Street. So I'm against increasing the unrelated persons living in a property, but I used to be for it. Back in 2015, when I moved back to Point after living in a variety of housing, I couldn't believe Point only allowed 2 unrelated people to live in a house or in a single family residence. If I own my house, I have a roommate to help pay with the rent. And then what if I start dating somebody? I couldn't have that person move in, or I'd have to then kick out my roommate. So what do you really do in that situation? And I saw multiple other people in the neighborhood also be in that similar situation. Many of them got around it by using a P.O. box for the other person living there, and some still do. But then the three unrelated, if owner occupied occurred. I was great. I'm good. I'm for that. That allowed people that own a home to have that additional income. However, then some bad things started to happen too. Landlords started to allow 3, 4, and 5 unrelated people in a single family home. Over 5 houses within 1.5 blocks of my home have gone from single family to rooming houses. Where are the families supposed to go that want to be in those houses? They just lost that opportunity to rent that home because landlords charge more for rooming houses because they charge per room or per person. A one-family home that rents at $2,400 a month on the north side that is about 1,800 square feet. Another one that's 1,600 square feet. The same house for 5 students means each student only pays $480 a month. So when you look at your disposable income, or not your disposable income, but your income that you're allowed to put towards rent, or you think you should budget for it, how much is that single family supposed to be making to be able to pay that $2,400? This is one of many homes like this. Many are available for viewing on pointoffcampus.com. You can go there and then look what used to be able to look at the GIS to see what the zoning was and then the use of that home, but the GIS hasn't been working properly for about half a year now, I think. Maybe 3 months, but it feels like a half a year. So is this the path that the city wants to take? Then if the city does want to increase the amount of people per home, then I think this should be something that we test out. We do it with a license. So in other meetings, people are saying, okay, there's no way to track this. Okay, are there going to be more student rentals occurring, more non-owner occupied houses that are having additional people come in? You can't track that really. So this is an opportunity to be able to have, to track that. So you allow people to come in and license an additional person for 1 year. It's not completely changing the ordinance permanently forever. It's for 1 year. And then you can also ask for demographics in that license. So then you're able to start tracking those demographics that you have not been able to obtain and see if these homes are owner-occupied that are asking for an additional resident, or if they are rentals that are asking for these additional people. 1 year. If the city says that this will create too much work, then you know that it's going to be a big change and there's going to be a lot of people going and changing their occupancies. But 1 year allows you to have that demographic information and track everything. And right now, you have no way to do that. So I would really like to see families staying in my neighborhood, or at least giving those families an opportunity to buy houses in the neighborhoods, because I like students. I don't mind having students that are even quiet next door. I don't mind having 5 people next door. But when families aren't able to move into homes because the rent is going up so much, that's what I don't like.
Public hearing remains open.
Okay, my name is John Kudreski. I live at 1740 Madison Street. I have lived there for 48 years. That means I have lived in the hood for 48 years. I've seen all this stuff come and go. And I had a house next to me when I got there, it was single family. It went to rental. And you have 2 years of a good renter, then 4 years of a bad renter, and I'll tell you, you forget those 2 years of a good renter real quick. And if my house would have stayed rental next to me, I would have moved. I'd never last there 48 years. All right. I was on the City of Stevens Point Council from 1995 to 2001 and was on the Housing Authority. The current housing and zoning in the city didn't just happen by accident. There were many factors that went into it. The city council before my term looked at the student housing in the city and put some boundaries and restrictions on them because people complained there was just too many student housing. It was not uncommon at that time that once a house turned into student housing, the backyards and side yards were turned into parking lots. Many of these ugly conversions still scar our neighborhoods. During my term on the council, the Housing Authority worked closely with CAP Services and many times pulled our money and were very successful in getting federal grants. Every year, give or take, sections of the city were looked at identifying different criteria, such as mean income and people living near the poverty level. With that information, federal grants were applied for. The grant money was used to offer low-interest loans to people so they could make home improvements. This allowed the housing stock in the city to stay up to date and looking good. The advantage to the city was updated housing helped keep the tax base up. When I go to other cities, I take a ride through the neighborhoods and check on the housing. I can tell right away that the city hasn't been proactive like Stevens Point because many of the neighborhoods look tired and worn with houses needing roofs, siding, and windows. While on the council, I attended a neighborhood meeting given by the then city planner, John Gardner. It was for the people who live north of Main Street, west of Michigan Avenue, and east of the downtown, generally the area around the university where there are a lot of student housing. He said when a city gets below 50% owner-occupied, neighborhoods tend to decline. At that time, I think the city was around 51 or 52% owner-occupied. Today, I talked to Adam at the city planning office, and he said the city is around 48% owner-occupied, using data from the last sentence. So I think that's at a dangerous point that I don't like that. The proposed ordinance, if approved, will only increase the percent of non-owner occupied houses in the city. That's going in the wrong direction. That is why I am totally against any more non-owner occupancy houses in the city. The city has a good balance right now. Currently, house values in the city are going up, and houses don't stay on the market long. It's the balance we need. I also don't like proposed ordinance changes because it mostly affects the older sections of Stevens Point. We already have lots of small lots, and the ordinance would reduce the already small lot requirements, plus allow more people to live on the small lots. The city already approved grandparent houses to help relieve the housing shortage. Add to that, any existing house can be rented out as a VBR for people to earn extra money. The city has multiple story apartments, trailer parks, and plan on building more apartments on the Shopko lot. So there are plenty of options out there already. The older parts of town are already carrying our load and bearing the brunt of these changes. We don't need more driveways and yards full of cars that spill out into the streets or more traffic going through the neighborhoods. We also need to create a desirable place to raise children. As I understand it, under the proposed ordinance change, a single-family house could be purchased by someone who won't live there, and then they can rent it out to up to 4 people. That makes single-family houses more desirable to rent out as a business. I don't like that because first-time home buyers will now be competing with investors who want another rental. As a property owner, I am like everybody else, and my house is my biggest investment. These proposed ordinances changes are an attack on my investment and our family-friendly neighborhoods. Why isn't Whiting Plover doing something to relieve this affordable housing problem? Show me a real estate listing that says, for sale, desirable single-family house surrounded by multiple family dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Just one point of clarification. If I heard you correctly, someone couldn't buy a single-family home, not live there, and rent to 4 people. The proposal is 3.
Okay.
Small difference.
I think this morning on Channel 7, you might have said 4.
4 people, 4 unrelated, if it's owner-occupied.
Owner-occupied, okay.
3 if it's not. That's what the proposal is right now. Public hearing is still open.
Mark Christensen, 1641 Clark Street, District 1 Alder. I'm going to keep this short because you guys had a chance to hear from me in November, but basically, I am glad that you're taking a look at this as just an incremental increase, and I am glad, too, that we're looking at that increase of 1 for both owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. I do think that making it 3 if it's non-owner occupied and 4 if it's owner occupied will help actually make more properties available, because you can fit more people into fewer numbers of houses, and so it'll actually increase the housing stock. I think an incremental approach is a wise approach, and I think making that incremental increase of 1 in both those categories is a wise move.
Public hearing remains open.
Hello, Deb Knippel. I'm here on behalf of myself at 611 Sumery Avenue and Frame Memorial Presbyterian Church at 1300 Main Street. And I was here on November 4th and spoke in favor of the proposed amendment at that time. And I just would like to say that we as Frame and myself continue to support the incremental increase in the definition of household entity. Frame does provide the warming center space, and I am a volunteer there, and I understand from my volunteering and talking with people that the challenges of finding housing in our area for many people of all ages is very difficult. And so I won't go through everything I said last time, but this would allow more flexible living arrangements, as many people have said, and we can provide greater access to affordable housing options and hopefully help keep people off the street. And then it maximizes existing housing, and it allows homeowners to utilize their unused rooms within their existing dwelling, making more efficient use of our current stock. And it supports diverse households. One statistic that I continue to be surprised at is, according to the U.S. Census, 46.4% of adults are single. And so many individuals, young professionals, seniors, and those on fixed incomes could benefit from sharing housing costs. This proposal is based on the recommendations from the 2023 City of Stevens Point Housing Task Force, and it reaffirms an earlier study from 2017, and I believe this change would take us in the direction that many people have already determined that would be a good thing for our community. So I urge you to support this definition. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open.
Fran McKinney, 716 Ridge Road, Stevens Point. I'm here as a member of the community and also as a member of Frame Church. As members of Frame Church, we supported the resolution on ending housing insecurity and homelessness. This resolution passed and is an excellent step towards addressing the current housing crisis. We support the amendment that was discussed in the November meeting, and including that residents and occupants may include 3 unrelated individuals, as has been mentioned, or 4 unrelated individuals, which includes a dwelling owner. We support this change as another next step in making more affordable housing possible for our unhoused neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open.
Can I add one thing?
And for the third and final time, the public hearing remains open. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that Plover is two unrelated relatives, or two unrelated people, and then also that if affordability to buy a home is going to be based on people being able to get a mortgage because they have two people or three people renting from them in their home, you can't get a loan saying that I'm going to have three people renting from my home. You can get a loan if you have an additional unit like a duplex, then that counts towards your income to get that home. But also, if you look right now online for available housing, there are a lot of two-bedroom units right now, and three-bedroom units, and one-bedroom unit even, that are priced between about $360 and $900 for the three bedrooms. They aren't the best housing, but it is available. It's not one of the new unit or new buildings, but there is that still available right now. So how much would it actually change for how much somebody's going to be paying per room when they're already renting these houses, four bedrooms at $2,400 a month to four students? It's less for an apartment.
Thank you. Public hearing is open. Public hearing remains open. And for the third and final time, the public hearing is open. For those of you who haven't been here, we have to legally talk, say 3 times about the public hearing being open before we close it. Sounds redundant, but it's the law. All right, seeing no one else wishing to speak, we will declare the public hearing closed. Bring it back. Adam, do you want to talk about the chart, which is also on page 7, and hopefully answer Commissioner Beekam's questions?
My question is just, with these other university campuses, do they have rooming houses that would offset what we have? Or
I believe most of these, I haven't looked in depth, that's just more based off of anecdotal knowledge.
Okay.
But yeah, so the two charts on the screen here, I know this was talked about or brought up once during the November meeting, asking for how the city compares with other communities with four-year public college, as well as other communities of a similar size to Stevens Point. So the first table on the left-hand side shows the communities that could easily find their their household entity definition and the amount of unrelated persons allowed. You can see most of them fall within the 3 or 4 range. None of the communities on both tables outline or differentiate unrelatedness by if the property owner resides there or not. Point is an exception there. There are a couple communities, however, that varies the amount of unrelated persons that can reside in a household unit by zoning district. Essentially, multifamily zoning districts would allow more unrelated versus that of single and two family. So pretty comparable between both tables in terms of falling within that 3 to 4 range, which would be consistent with the request included here tonight.
Commissioners, thoughts, comments, questions, or a motion?
Some comments. I've probably given this way too much headspace the last 2 months, but you know, first off, what I'd say is I'm in favor of this, the move to 3, because I do feel like we're outdated, and largely because I see trends in generational young professional in terms of rental living and having, more than 2. That said, I think with this discussion, the potential upsides have been overstated and the potential downsides are understated. I don't see anything that suggests that this is going to affect the unhoused in our community. There are other challenges to that community to get them into housing. And I also worry about our housing structure. I mean, we've got 50 years with the 2 unrelated model. And granted, we're just making a change to 3, but it is a disruption. I'm in favor of that, but I get nervous when I hear gradual or incremental. 4 could be devastating. And it's amazing to me that in the last 10 years, the prevailing wisdom went from we have overcrowding and blight and problems in neighborhoods And moving away from that to now, you're going to have every duplex that goes from 4 to 6. That's a 50% change. I'm in favor of it, but beyond that, I think it's a big mistake. I'm most protective of the housing market and our folks' ability to buy homes. And I think that was spoken on by some of the comments. I do think it makes a difference. I called a number of realtors coming out of this meeting and asked them the difference from 2 to 3. Does that tend to tip the scales, so to speak? Because contrary to some of the rhetoric that you hear locally, the math with 2 unrelated does not work very well to make money as a rental. But when you go to 3, it has a change. The realtors do not feel that it's going to be as drastic, but 4 is a definite game changer. That's where I think the scales tip. And to Ms. Olson's comments, we want people buying homes, and I'm saying that as a landlord. If you want a healthy housing market, you need people ability to keep them in your community and go from renting a place to maybe renting a nicer place to buying a starter home to buying a nicer home. That's how you're going to have a healthy market. And I think we're already challenged in that. So I'm a little bit nervous there. I do want to accommodate people that have different, kind of a generational change on how they live. Nonetheless, this is a change that, could have some impact. I was encouraged watching the council meeting in November when the director spoke, knowing that he is new in his position, but I think he was pretty much dead on. You're not going to know anything about this change for probably 3 or 4 years from now. That's the reality. The idea that we said, well, 6 months ago we changed it for home ownership from 2 to 3 and we haven't seen problems. You're not gonna, because I don't think that's really where you're gonna move the needle. If you make this change, you are gonna have investors competing with the people that are gonna be home ownership, and they're gonna lose. You are gonna see differences in those neighborhoods, and it's gonna take 3 or 4 years because a lot of stuff, especially the student stuff, is already it's rented from June 25 until May of 26, meaning that this isn't going to go into effect until 2026, and then you can start tracking data. So you're 3 or 4 years out before you can even tell whether or not 3 makes a difference. I'm in favor of 3. I would come out and strongly oppose 4 because I think that that's where you're going to start to create more problems than you hope to create solutions. And I'm not sure that you're going to fix anything with this. I do think you're going to drive down some rents for students, and I think that that's a good thing. And I think you're going to accommodate some young professionals, and I think that that's a good thing as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, maybe just a few additional comments. Maybe kind of echo a similar sentiment. I think this is obviously a really well-intentioned move. It's by no means, a silver bullet. I think it very likely should have some effects on just basic supply and demand, right? We very likely have 3-bedroom houses currently being rented that are being underutilized, right? This changes that. This does have a positive effect on that. One of the concerns that certainly came up in November is, I guess, what I would call escalation, right? The landlords recognizing, to Ms. Olson's point, that yeah, we can squeeze a little more profit out of these houses now, and it does create potentially unique competition, and that. To Commissioner Beacom's point, we won't really see that kind of flesh out for a long time. I think that's really challenging. So all of this feels pretty speculative in terms of what are really the impacts here, positive and negative. I think related to the negative impacts, and the concerns of the community at large of having more people. I think gets back to enforcement, maybe more than anything. Yes, adding more people means more cars and just more people, and I think people speculate or maybe have fears about, renters not being good, good neighbors. That requires the city to kind of understand, hey, we're adding some density in these neighborhoods, or we've got the opportunity to add density in the neighborhoods, and making sure that there's quality enforcement of our normal ordinances that are in place, not of how many people are staying in these houses, but are they parking their cars in their driveway, and are they taking out their trash, and are they, I mean, the regular stuff that we expect from each other's neighbors. That's got very little to do with whether there's 2 or 3 people in the house. It's just enforcement of the other ordinances. So, yeah, I'm a little on the fence here as well. Again, I obviously see the positive intent of this. I think generally I'm fairly supportive. I think it's hard to determine what kind of significant positive outcome would come out of this change in the short term. I'm not necessarily fearful of immediate negative impacts either. So I think it's something that the city will have to, as best they can, through whatever mechanisms and means they have, to like monitor how this change is impacting our communities and the rents and access to housing.
Thank you. Commissioner Schuler.
I'm, excuse me, all over on this, and I have no idea where to even start with how I'm feeling about this. I reviewed our previous discussion as a plan commission. I reviewed the council's discussion in November, and it is kind of a jumble. I have to say that. As we discussed previously, we understand the need. We understand that this is a way to try to expand options for people to live, knowing that we couldn't know exactly how positive or negative it was for a long period of time, unable to really identify any metrics by which we could judge how things were going. And during the council discussion, hearing the city attorney mention that enforcement is a very, very difficult issue. I'm very happy that this is going to ping pong a little bit. I'm really happy that Adam in the report discussed the regulations currently in place for livable area and how that impacts your ability to have people within a rental unit, so that it makes us understand that it's not just a number that's automatically going to be applied to a house or whatever, but it's going to be the opportunity for that subject to the availability of the space to allow the people to live, right? So it's not just the number equals that many people are going to live there and automatically cause the problems that people are afraid of, but at the same time, the idea of when does that enforcement or that review of available space take place, that's also kind of unknown at this point, or unknowable. So yeesh, I think is my best comment. I think everybody wants to take whatever step we can. And we also don't want to feel like we're just taking a step to take a step. We want to feel like we're doing something that is actually in service of what we're trying to achieve. And based on, again, on the conversation as it was at the council, I think what we decide here, and I'm not saying that we have to vote a certain way, but I understand the council, the majority of folks there, were very much in favor of 3 and 4. And I'm not sure what type of, without getting into another weird loop of, can they change something we recommend on the floor of the council and have to come back to us again, right? So I'm at a loss. I can't really say with complete certainty that, yes, this is a positive affirmative step that will not have any of the possible negative consequences that Commissioner Beacom discusses and has feelings on. I can't say those won't happen. Yeesh. So I am very much open to supporting the 3 and 4, but I can't guarantee to anyone who asks me if it will absolutely accomplish good or bad. And I hate feeling like that as a commissioner, and I don't see any way that I can't feel like that given this subject. And I think it's something we might discuss a little bit more in the later item with the survey and however the housing will be discussed in the future. But I apologize, that's kind of a mess, but that's where my brain's at on this.
Thank you. That's actually kind of relevant because I understand that Director Kivila for Christmas got a magic 8-ball. I'm disappointed that he didn't bring it tonight. We say that with tongue in cheek, but that's really what we're dealing with here. We don't have data to support it one way or the other. We are making educated guesses to the best of our ability. And it actually shows that you're thinking, you're doing your job, you're doing the reason that you were appointed to this body, and that's to try and sort through this thing using the expertise that you all have to try and make choices with undetermined outcomes. Like Commissioner Beacom said, yeah, we may be understating some of the positives or understating some of the negatives and overstating some of the positives. Will it have an impact? I think we can all say yes. What will that impact be? Sheesh. Or yeesh? Yeesh. Yeesh. No S. The S is silent, like in tree.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other thoughts, comments? Motion? If there's some data that you would help make your decision, we can try and get that, but I don't know what that would be at this point. We've talked about it a fair amount. Commissioner Arntzen.
I guess just to revisit, we in November went with the 2 independent for non-owner occupied and 3 for the owner occupied, and that was kind of our one-step progression.
Actually, it is 3 owner occupied right now. The proposal was going to 3 for non-owner occupied, just that one small change.
Oh, all right.
Incremental. But yeah, the proposal in November was,
and then the council passed it
to
back
make it
to us,
3 across the
adding
board.
4.
There was discussion at council, and I don't want to misspeak, but the discussion at council was kick them each up 1. So moving from 3 non-owner occupied or owner occupied to 4.
Okay.
And from 2 unrelated non-owner occupied to 3.
All right, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how that worked out. Anyway, yeah, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Kneebone. Now discussion.
I guess, yeah, maybe just a quick comment, specifically related to I understand the council's desire to kind of keep that incentive for owner-occupied property. I guess the moving from 3 to 4 in an owner-occupied situation, I'm struggling to come up with a lot of scenarios where that actually is likely. I mean, in my mind, maybe a young professional with either a very good job or support externally is able to buy a fairly large home and then have 3 roommates and make it affordable for all 4 of them. Outside of that, I really struggle to see a frequent scenario, which I guess is, I don't know, makes me feel fine about the number 4. I guess I don't see it being kind of exploited, if you will, by investors. A wealthy investor from out of state isn't saying, well, I'll do it and come move here and then get 3 roommates. That also limits kind of there's not a huge net benefit to it either above the 3. So I guess, I don't know if any of the rest of you have thoughts or comments around that. I don't see the move being really significant, again, positive or negative, to move from the 3 to the 4 on the owner-occupied side.
Commissioner, I can give you 2 examples that I'm aware of that have happened.
Yep.
Both of them involved someone who chose to go to school here.
Yep.
And bought the house, had roommates. One of them, after they graduated, I assume they graduated, they sold the house. And the other one is still occupied. But those are the only 2 I can think of, and they were both related to students. Instead of renting a college house, they bought one and rented. They had some roommates, covered the mortgage, and when they cashed out whenever they left school or decided to leave the area, the one did. The one still is occupied. They got some equity.
Yeah, which I think is terrific. I just don't know. That's probably not
I think you're
super
right. I don't
frequent
think it's going to be widespread.
And I would just say, to that, I do think you can, anecdotally find that. It comes down to just the confusion. One of the things we deal with realtors when you have these rules is they're communicating to somebody buying it. Is it 3 or is it 4? So that person buys it and they've got 1 plus 3, and then they sell it and they tell the next person that, and that person's an investor. And so, is this going to be an enforcement nightmare? Yeah, and I think that it becomes the honor system. And we probably have that already to some degree, and you hear evidence of that. But this will be confusing to people entering, the housing market. So I don't see that as a way for people to build equity. I just don't think it's going to happen a lot. But it also doesn't bother me.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yeah. I just want to thank staff for providing additional information this month that we didn't have the last time at the Plan Commission meeting, information that's going to help lead me towards a yes vote today, just by comparing Stevens Point to other comparable communities. It doesn't look like this decision is out of the ordinary and is an incremental one. Whether or not these communities have found success with their ordinance change, that information is not available. But seeing that other communities have gone in this direction, it doesn't seem like this is out of reach for Stevens Point.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Scenario that I see could very well be me. I live in a 3-bedroom, 0 lot line. I could rent out the master bedroom to 2 people. They might not be married, they might be a couple. I could live in one of the other bedrooms and rent out the 3rd one. That'd be 4 of us. And right now, it's about $800 a month between the mortgage and what I set aside for property taxes. And I'm on a fixed income, and that would be a little over half of my income for the month if I had to pay that on my own. So I look at it in terms of maybe empty nesters in a big house that don't particularly want to move or can't find a nice, smaller place and don't want to rent. They could bring in a couple of people if, the kids are gone and aren't interested in coming back. That's kind of the way I look at it, is keeping someone like me on a fixed income in my home maybe longer than I might be able to stay if I was on my own. So, but again, that would take a long time to figure out if something like that really would happen. But that's the scenario I think of, as somebody who's already a homeowner and circumstances have changed and they want to bring more people in for whatever reason. This gives them an opportunity. So
I'll move in, we'll both save money.
okay. No conflict.
Any other
of
thoughts? Okay, final comments from the audience? Okay, the motion is to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that will get forwarded to council in about 2 weeks. Item number 4 is a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend Chapter 23 of the zoning ordinance, Section 23.02, Sub 1, Sub E, Sub 4, pertaining to minimum lot size requirements for single-family and two-family dwellings in the R3 and two-family residence, single and two-family residence district. The lot area for a single-family dwelling is amended from 5,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet. The lot area for a single-family zero-lot line dwellings is amended from 5,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet. And the lot area for a two-family dwelling is amended from 10,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. Adam, you want to summarize before we get started?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So the first slide, just to kind of take a 30,000-foot view here. Where are the portions of town that are zoned R3 single and two-family residential? That would, generally speaking, would be the area on the city's north side up to Maria Drive, the area south of campus, and then the area south of downtown to about the railroad tracks. So the mayor mentioned what the minimum lot size requirements are as of now for the R3 district. Single family would be 5,000 square feet and a duplex would be 10,000 square feet. The request would be to essentially shave off 1,000 square feet per unit. I guess before I go further, I think a good question that's always asked for any ordinance amendment request is why? What's the purpose behind why staff in this instance is requesting this change? There's really two reasons. First and foremost is to reduce the number of non-conforming properties that exist here in the city. I don't want to get too legalese and all things zoning, but essentially what a non-conforming use in this instance means is that there's a duplex, say, on a parcel that is 8,000 square feet in size. It fails to meet the 10,000 square foot minimum lot size requirement. As such, it would be grandfathered and considered legal non-conforming. The purpose behind this request, if you can see on the next slide, is to transfer a lot of these legal non-conforming uses that exist from that being legal non-conforming to legal conforming with today's code. So you see the parcels on the screen here are those that fall within that 8 to 10,000 square foot range. About half of these parcels consist of duplexes, which would now be considered conforming should this would be considered a conforming use should this ordinance amendment be approved. A sliver of these have triplexes or other uses that are just prohibited already on that parcel, so much so that this change wouldn't do anything. And then the other parcels not mentioned would be those that have a single family right now that could theoretically add a second unit as part of this change. I'll just make that caveat first and foremost that there's a lot of other zoning regulations that come into play, setbacks being one of them. There's a lot of building code regulation that comes into play. A significant amount of those properties, odds are, would not be able to add a second unit just because of some of those other constraints. Why does that matter in the whole grand scheme of things to reduce the amount of grandfathered situations, grandfathered uses here? I think it really comes down to this. There's a number of permits that are applied for each and every year for folks to do a smaller improvement on their property. If it's a small addition to add a bathroom, a bedroom, an enclosed porch, for example. There's been a number of times in my tenure with the city where I've had to deny such requests because they're a non-conforming use, and doing so would enlarge the footprint of that non-conforming use, something that I'm unable to do. Now, I think personally speaking, if a property owner is willing to spend the time and money to improve their property and can meet other zoning code regulations meant to help protect the health, safety, and general welfare of its neighbors, setbacks, building height being a few examples, why should our zoning code necessarily prohibit that type of improvement? So really that's the big reason for why this change is being proposed. A second reason behind this is that there are 8 vacant parcels that could allow a single family use right now that, should this change be adopted, could now build a duplex instead, right? Is it a significant number? No, but it's progress nonetheless. So staff's recommendation is to approve. Last thing I'll note is that this request would be consistent with a few other recommendations that's been handed down by the council over the years. The Housing and Security resolution adopted late last year. The Housing Task Force's final report referenced the need to reduce minimum lot size requirements. And then lastly, the city's 2005 comprehensive plan notes the need for amending the city's ordinance to try to incur and allow for property owners to perform maintenance work and smaller additions onto their residences. So I think, this proposed request would adhere and would align with those recommendations from the council.
Thank you. Before we open the public hearing, are there any clarifying questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Rice.
Just a couple, I guess, related to lot, maybe quantities. So for this group of parcels, 8 to 10,000, you said about half currently have duplexes. And do you have a rough idea of how many current existing single-family home lots that would fall into this group could reasonably accommodate a second unit?
An exact number? No,
exact number.
A range. So there's 449 parcels that are shown on the screen here that falls between 8 to 10,000, half of that would be about 225. How much of that can realistically be added? I think you're talking maybe a third at best.
Okay.
That's maybe adventurous.
So maybe another 50 to 80, give or take, something like that. Okay. And then you mentioned that there's a lot of these non-conforming uses in that 8 to 10,000 range. Are there similar kind of legal non-conforming in that 4 to 5,000 range of the single family, or is that way less common?
Less common. I made a note in here. The reason I didn't say it because that's zoning code technicalities.
Yeah.
So 5,000 is the minimum square foot for single unit in the R3 district. We have a provision in our zoning code that says if there's any lot that has been in existence since 1979 or prior to 1979, even if it fails to meet that minimum lot size requirement of 5,000 square feet, it is nonetheless permitted to have a single family use on the property or any non-residential uses allowed within that district. So there's, I think I have the reference in here, 141 parcels that fall between the 4 to 5,000 square foot range. Over 90% of those parcels have been in existence pre-1979.
Okay.
What's the minimum single-family square footage?
5,000.
For the house?
It would be 900 square feet.
I know, okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we'll declare the public hearing open.
Andrea Olson again, 410 Franklin Street. I'm for the reduction in lot size, that's fantastic. However, a couple things that I wanted to touch on. I'm wondering why the lot size for zero lot line houses isn't 3,000. Because on 4th Avenue, it was rezoned to redevelopment zoning, I think it's called, and then each side of that lot or each unit is on 3,000 square feet. So then 3,000 and 3,000, you have 2 homes on 6,000 square feet. Then we look at, I'd like to know how many single family, how many R3 lots are non-conforming right now that are being used as duplexes that are about 6,000 square feet. Because my house, when I bought it, I had to convert it to single family, and it's on a 6,000 square foot lot. The other house that we purchased that has an open permit on it right now because of some issues, that one I got a letter in the mail saying that that house now has to be converted from a duplex to single family too, because that one had a vacancy for over a year. So there's a lot of houses that's a duplex. That duplex is on 6,000 square feet. You can put 2 zero lot lines on 3,000 square feet each, 6,000 square feet. So why is it suddenly allowed? You look at the zoning map online right now, it says that those are R3. Did those get converted back to R3? So we only have to just do some spot zoning then, which isn't allowed, but I guess sort of is allowed for our lots that are 6,000 square feet to get our duplexes conforming and then have it zoned back to R3. Because if we're allowing that in some instances, but not in others, when these houses were built as duplexes in 1880, and now they're non-conforming due to our zoning and all that stuff, but we can't use them that way, but they work that way, but we can't, and it's all related to our lot sizes. I don't understand why we aren't allowing duplexes to be allowed onto 6,000 square foot lots. So this isn't, it's fixing some things, but how many of the 6,000 square foot houses have caused issue, or 6,000 square foot lots with duplexes on them, has the city had people come in and then be forced to single family? Because I think that 6,000 mark is really the tipping point, and it's not anything else, because lots of our lots are that 6,000 square feet. No, that's good. Never mind.
Thank you. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. And for the third, go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm Glenn Avang. I live at, there's something going there. I live at 2725 Peck Street. And I really don't have a lot to say. I just had a question. With this zoning then will affect the entire city. Correct?
Glenn, we'll get to the questions after the public hearing.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
make note of it and answer your question then.
Sounds good to me. Thanks.
Perfect. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing remains open. For the third and final time, the public hearing is open. Seeing and hearing no one else wishing to speak, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Adam, do you want to answer Glenn's question first and then?
Yeah, so it would only impact really the parcels that, I know it's hard to see on the screen here, but the parcels that are shaded in orange. Yeah, just the parcels that fall within the 8,000 to 10,000 square foot range.
So more directly, maybe it would be citywide, but only affecting the parcels that fall within that range. Does that make sense?
And our R3?
Correct.
It sounds a little like it's got two ends to it or something. Are we only talking about a certain zoning?
Glenn, I got to have you come up to the microphone because nobody at home is going to be able to pick that up if you have a question.
Well, R3. You're just talking R3?
Just R3, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, questions, or a motion?
I'll offer a couple. Certainly in favor of this. Similar to our last discussion, we're a little outdated, and zoning's been something I think the city's been talking about or hoping to get to for some time. With regard to any vacant lots, I'm certainly in favor of anything that puts homes on those or duplexes on those. And I'll say that, this weekend, just out of curiosity, I looked at, what we have for duplexes, and at current, 0 are conforming. Under this change, 50% would be conforming, meaning the other 50% still are not conforming. The issue there is, I think, what was brought up in a comment, and I guess my question is, if we have kind of that special provision for 1979 when it comes to a lot to put a single family on it, why wouldn't we look at the same thing with a duplex when we're trying to increase density in the city?
Okay. Either one of you want to field that?
Yeah, I mean, is it a possibility? Sure. I think the reason why we went with this approach is more to follow the incrementalist approach, like discussed last time. To address the question of, why not reduce that minimum lot size down to 6,000 for duplexes, 3,000 per unit. I think it more so addresses the fact that a number of the single-family uses that exist right now could, in fact, now add a second unit as a result of that change, and we want to make sure, how much of an impact is that going to have, again, positively or negatively. So that's the reason why we took more of the incrementalist approach with the 1,000 square foot. But yeah, I mean, could we add language about the non-conforming duplexes that exist right now? Sure. I guess my one question would be, where would it end? Would it be just duplexes? Because you can make that similar argument for a lot of other uses.
And I think that's fair, and I don't think it'd be wise to drop it down for new construction to 6,000, for some of those. But if you have existing that have always operated as a duplex, one of the things people look at all the time in terms of insurance, if you have a partial loss, the insurance company is only going to give you a partial on that, but the city's going to say you can't rebuild it to a duplex. So you have that limbo that exists. So if it's pre-existing, if it's non-conforming, I can make an argument for that. For anything new, I think 8 and 4 is a good step for us.
Thank you. Adam, before I forget, because it's not specifically related to the agenda item, but can you touch on Andrea's question about the 0 lot line?
About why it was not 3,000 instead of 4,000.
Right.
I think that was more just to keep it consistent with the single family, so it's
And that was a
4,000 per unit.
Traditional overlay district too, wasn't it?
No, so that 3,000,
wasn't?
no, just for the R3 district.
Okay. All right. All right. Thoughts, comments? Motion.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Bob. We'll give it to Ms. Skoviak. Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think, I guess Adam's point about just getting some things into conforming use, and I guess I wasn't aware of that restriction that you were saying is, you're getting people who do want to make investments in their property, and if they have these non-conforming uses, that there are limitations to what you can kind of allow them to do. So, for folks obviously we're fans of neighborhoods and making investments in our properties. So if that removes some of the red tape for a lot of homeowners, that's hugely beneficial. I think density is kind of a double-edged sword, but I think it sounds like there might be some opportunity for additional density on some parcels, whether they're vacant or existing. I think that's generally net positive, and we've tried to explore a lot of avenues to find opportunities for density. So I think this is just kind of, another piece of the puzzle potentially a little bit. So I'm certainly supportive, and maybe there is an opportunity kind of down the road to minimize that further as the city evolves and changes. I think, this might be an okay incremental step for right now.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note, too. I don't know that this is going to have any widespread effect either, but similar to what Commissioner Beacom said, speaking internally, we realize that we have a small number of lots that really aren't buildable because of the current zoning ordinances. This one brings it a little more in line with some of the other things that we've done. And I think you said 8? There would be 8 lots now that become buildable. And if we're going to talk about addressing housing affordability and getting a single family home, this is a small piece of that. All right, any additional comments before we vote? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that is approved. That'll go to council as well on the 21st. Item number 5 is a request to enter into an easement agreement with Wisconsin Public Service for an unaddressed parcel bounded by County Road HH and Badger Avenue, with the parcel identified in your packet. We did speak about this before. We weren't quite sure why. We didn't have an answer at the time from Public Service. Normally, those utilities would be on the right-of-way, but Director Badun is here to give us the answer that we got from Wisconsin Public Service.
I'll give you as much answer as otherwise they gave us, which hopefully I haven't had an opportunity. I did get a response from them, was included in the packet. I think it's much more of a higher level than even I was kind of hoping for. I was asking some rather pointed questions, like why specifically here is it necessary? I think what we otherwise see written here is kind of their general approach to it, and we have seen this in the past. This request come in from WPS to do that. I know even what I found out more recently is on EM Cops, when we did the extensions there over the past few years, they've asked us for easement. We actually have told them no. I did find out that they did get, according to WPS, Lineage Logistics provided them an easement to accommodate them along the north side of EM Cops as we've extended it there. I think really the question that comes out from here, from perspective, is even if it's the same memo from last month, is that from Public Works, we really don't have an opinion regardless one way or the other. It's if they're in the right of way, that's really my purview. Once they get outside that, I guess, I turn it over to you individuals to collectively put your minds together and decide what's in the best interest. Once again, of course, just some of the things that we're well aware is it's, WPS, they're not offering to pay for said easement. They're just looking for us to grant this to them. I know there's value to the land, but again, that's not for me to say how we dispose of that property. I really think the underlying question here now is, as we look at the remainder of development for that East Park Commerce Centers, how do we want to approach it? I think from my own perspective, it's a matter of what do you feel is the best value? Where do we put these things? Because we will take in engineering a different approach to how we probably put these roadways together, realizing if we are going to grant easements outside that, if that's This is going to set the precedent to moving forward that within each other segment, this is just the first of several. This doesn't even extend power and gas all the way north and south. This is just 1/4 of a mile of a nearly mile-long road. So you know that there are more potential, these coming along as we add more roadways and the network within there. How are we going to deal with it? So it really becomes the underlying question, how do we want to serve that? And from my own perspective is then that question, how do you wish that we best serve that? Is it easements, or do we want to continue to do it as we've done this way? Our intent was to put 100-foot right away there to make sure that there was room, realizing that there would be needs. They're just more so than your typical residential, neighborhood. So to make sure there was room for facilities, that's part of the reason why we have 100-foot right of way there. WPS is just looking to get outside that. I think in the future we could look at reducing it to provide an easement. So that's really my question for you within this question being proposed to us by WPS. So if there's any other questions, I can try to answer them as best I can, but what you have here is pretty much what I have, except for you, Jeff. No questions from you.
So,
anyone else have a question?
Yeah. Well, I want to point out, too, that it's completely within our purview. There is value to that easement. That easement area will be restricted use, and it's not unprecedented. We charge for easements in some instances. So that is also an option. Commissioner Schuler, did you have?
Sure, now I've forgotten my point.
Perfect. See what I did there? You owe me one.
Actually, I want to follow up with something you said about future planning, where stuff is going to go. I saw that WPS in their talking points mentioned that as a part of it, how seeing as they don't know where other things will be, they can't know, they speculated on some possible larger uses or whatever. Does their point on that seem like it's valid? Because it seemed like a relatively somewhat tangible reason for them to take the position that they took, right? And so, and you mentioning it yourself, is there somewhat credence to that then, that they're going, oh, we don't know where it's going to go, so we want to go here to make sure we can have as many options as we can to distribute power from that? I think that was their main point, right?
Right, as I understand it as well. I mean, that's exactly what it is. I mean, it is easier for them to tie into in the future and run their, what I don't know, and because I'm not a designer and not an electrical and gas person by any stretch of the imagination, to know if there is a better situation for them, which I think is part of the unknowns, is, right now they're looking at the west side because that's really where we put this whole thing really came about because we need to power the lighting system that we put in with Badger Avenue. So we put in a request, or the contractor did, for service, and then to provide that service, they're looking to get this easement. What we're asking for in electrical power is far less than what something else will. To power the handful of lights that we have there is pretty much just household electricity type power versus what large industrial type use of it. Exactly what that requires and how that fits, and whether it's the west side where they're asking now because we have an immediate need, or better on the east side, that I don't know. I know it does give them more flexibility because, as they say, they don't have to come in and tear up any of our facilities to work within theirs. Even if they're going to cross the roadway, they'll dig a pit within their easement and they'll directionally drill generally underneath the road. So it is less disruptive to what can be there, especially if they're coming in and out to do that, which can be a benefit to us. We don't have a pathway. There is the pathway on that same side, west side. If they work within that area, they're not cutting that open to put in a new transformer and connect, to future facilities. But yeah, that's what I understand, yes.
And so with the general implied yet not stated, somewhat, not negative comments, but concerns, still maintaining a neutral position on it. The bad things that might happen, they might not, but they might, is what I think your point was. So.
Right, yeah. I mean, they might, and yeah. So I think, we're still neutral. We believe, based on our understanding, that there is enough room. Even talking to WPS, asking them what that. One of the things that they didn't ask more specifically, because I think they lay it out in their response here in the unknowns, is how much space do you really need? You're asking for a 12-foot easement. We have a 100-foot right-of-way. I think we have 12 feet of room to spare, for you, that we're not occupying and have no intent to occupy for a long period of time. And I could, to add more to that, I can think of as they even talk about like future rail stuff, which we do, and some of that's not always laid out. If we have easements and we're crossing those, now, are we ever going to come into a situation where we're conflicting with the easements we're granting them and the facilities that they're putting in? I don't know. that comes into what I would say are the unknowns. If they're in the right-of-way and we know we're crossing there, we simply let them know and then they have to relocate them, which is what they're trying to avoid. In another situation, we could be paying them to relocate things to, put our facilities, what we feel is our best interest, into those places. Whether that's actually going to occur, I don't know. I mean, as they don't, so I think everyone's just speculating on what it is and hedging their bets to say that if something happens, they're safer, to put theirs in it. Don't blame them for that. We wouldn't want to build a road across private property, would we? I mean, that's why we have public right-of-ways, is we want to control the property that we're working on.
Thank you, Scott.
Again, Jared got...
Absent the magic 8-ball.
He got a magic 8-ball, and another an instance where we could have used that. My personal opinion on this is to not grant the easement at this time. We don't know what it's going to look like any more than the next person. They have a substantial amount of right-of-way to work within now, and as that area builds out, we can cross that easement when we come to it.
How close are we to orange cords?
I don't know how many we have, but we probably have enough up in Public Works to get us by for a little while.
Electrical tape, it makes them waterproof.
Yeah, right, to do that. Yeah, and to that, what the mayor's saying, and I have no problem going back to WPS and saying, can we sit down and have a talk? We can get these gentlemen here on this end of here, to have a talk about how we will service, what their sort of needs are, what their plans are. I know even they mentioned possibilities of potential substations, whatever. And I have to admit, I don't know how that all plays in. They're going to need more land clearly outside the right of way if they're going to start to do things like that. And we can talk more about and create a plan. This is actually one of the questions I did ask WPS and never got a response to it. Do I think they were busy enough putting this together? Not that I think they were ignoring me. I think they ran out of time. Was just about doing that, having a sit-down meeting and let's talk about how do we service this beyond just this immediate request, to get an idea, because I honestly can't answer those questions. What are they looking for and what is in their best interest? And are they simply responding to a request for service now? And I hate to think that we're asking for granting easement here, then they're asking for another one to kind of duplicate that. Who knows, we might end up with easements on both sides of the road. I don't know.
One last thing I'll ask. So given your conversation with them, is there any other information or decision that the city can provide to you to better inform your conversation with them, to maybe have them come to a conclusion that is not just what was in the talking points? You mentioned that you also are at a disadvantage because you don't know where stuff is going to go. So it's all basically speculation.
Right, and I'm not sure we have that information. I think the only thing that really comes together is another thing that the mayor brought up, is that, if it's a matter that we want to bring to it, is the fact that we wish to be compensated. I think I'd like to enter that into it. I can't necessarily negotiate what that is, but at least let them know that that's whatever is, again, with these gentlemen, just say that, okay, what are we going to do? And this, consensus is that this land was very expensive. We purchased this land at a considerable sum, and now we're kind of giving away and restricting what it can be used for. And I guess that's part of the reason why this question is. It's disposition of property, which is, what we rely on. You find people most of you find people to jump on things to do.
Any other thoughts? In light of the fact that we don't have that magic 8-ball, I think it's prudent to just recommend that we do not grant the easement tonight and ask the director to work with public service and city staff to come up with a plan going forward. Again, that's going to be difficult too, because nobody here knows what that area is going to look like in 15, 20 years. But I think we would be selling ourselves short to start putting some of these uses in and restrictions in without knowing what happens. Any thoughts to the contrary? Otherwise, I'll make that a motion. Motion will be to deny. I need a second.
I'll second.
We don't have to add the staff part because staff heard us, so they can just do that. The motion is to deny. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed to the denial? Director, let them know and see what you might be able to come up with in the future.
I will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 6 is discussion on the, that's not 6, this is 6. No, that's not 6. There it is. Sorry, I was misclicking. Discussion on the housing survey. Adam, you want to talk about what we're looking for, just input?
Yeah, so we talked last month about city staff working on sending out a housing survey. I think before we really spend a lot of time and energy on that, I'd like to get some input from you folks as to what you're seeking, specifically what types of data are you looking to gather as part of the survey? Are there any questions that you thought of that you know you want to be asked, or that you know you want to be included in the survey? So this is really more just an open-ended conversation to hash out those details. So I'll kick it back to the mayor to begin the conversation.
We want to know what you want to know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to find out why people aren't buying houses. Is it because the interest rates are too high? Is it because the down payment is too much? Is it a financial restriction, or is it cultural? Do they just are not interested in buying a house? Do they, somebody feel like they're only here for 3 or 4 years and they don't want to make the investment? Why are you not buying? What are the reasons? And yeah.
I think a good follow-up to that would be, what barriers do you see if you want to buy a house? What barriers do you see? Is it saving for the down payment? Right. Is it the house prices are just too crazy? Yeah. Is it the interest rates that are prohibitive? That sort of thing. Other thoughts? Mr. Beacom?
I did get some things out to staff, but late, I admit. But for me, it's more about drilling down into some of the discussions we have. I feel like the discussions around affordable housing and people that are stressed are pretty flimsy at best. And so it's finding out more about those individuals in that category. How many adults, what things that they're faced with in their decision-making, how many people are students. Again, I've mentioned that before, they should be excluded from that because we know that that's a class that's going to be over 30%. And how many of those people are making, choices and choosing to go above 30% because they're looking for things. That becomes more of a housing affordability / preference than true affordable housing. So drilling into that data to understand that better so that we can actually begin to meet the needs of those folks instead of just continuing to bring up the same rhetoric.
Okay. Anyone else?
Maybe related to that is something I've been thinking about recently. It'd be hard to flesh out, I think, but I think when we did the first mandated affordability study a few years ago, there was some data that kind of pointed to quite a few Stevens Point homeowners basically having super affordable housing. They were choosing to stay in a house that was incredibly inexpensive, right? They could afford way more housing, but they were choosing to stay in a house they've lived in for 20 years and that was relatively small, which I kind of get the kind of the cultural, emotional part of that. The other part of that equation in terms of housing affordability, and as it relates to people being stagnant in housing is, that's the most affordable housing. The most affordable housing in our community is housing that is 50 years old and is occupied, right? People say, we need to build more affordable housing. Well, it costs $275 a square foot to build new housing. That's not affordable. The affordable house is the one we're all living in. I want to know what would motivate people to move. A phrase that came up during the housing task force was hermit crabbing, where people consistently evolve in their housing. And it opens up opportunities for everyone to move, right? It's an upward mobility thing. that's something that is hard to kind of get at. But if we can free up some of the more affordable housing in our community by giving good options to existing residents, that would create some of that opportunity. But there isn't housing that we or they or whatever want to move into. So how do we find that housing? So distill that into one concise question, Adam, and I think that'll be super helpful.
I gotcha.
Does that make sense, kind of, what I was driving at? Okay.
I'd offer another tangent, not to bog down staff. Maybe this is for another time.
Show me up.
All right. But kind of on an aside, we've talked a lot about, housing insecurity and some of those things. And a number of years ago, I worked with Mark Cordes and also Travis from Candlewood and tried to promote Rent Ready. And one of the challenges with that program was just getting landlord participation. And there's a number of reasons for that. And so it might not be a bad thing to understand that side a little bit better. What are some things that tip the scale that help them? Because a lot of times that's not an income issue, that's things that you can screen out. And in some cases, if a landlord abides by a certain screening criteria, you're stuck. You can't break that criteria for an individual. But if there's a program like that, that gives you kind of a loophole. So finding those willing participants, but also maybe understanding the people that did try that program, the good and the bad of that. Understanding the housing providers locally and what might help them open up more of the existing stock for that community.
Okay. Any other things that have just been gnawing at you, keeping you awake at night? Commissioner Schuler?
A question of the timing of the survey. I think that we talked a little bit at our last meeting about with all of the discussion leading up to the current moment on housing issues, that it would be a good idea somehow addressing the housing element. And in the housing element, there's a series of demographic information. Would it be a good idea to try to update and understand that type of information first before settling on the final form of a survey? I think the last thing you'd want to do is do a survey because it's going to be fairly labor intensive or time intensive, and then realize as you got into actual uncovering issues, concerns, and possible goals, objectives type of information that you missed something, that something would have made good sense to have been asked. And so I would just toss that out there. Is there an opportunity here to take a couple months to work on parts of the chapter that would be kind of inform the general environment that housing is currently, and just make sure that we understand every question that we need to ask. The stuff that's been brought up so far is great. I'm very interested in questions along those lines, but I think we wouldn't want to do it prematurely.
Okay.
That would be my only comment.
Thank you. Let me open it up to anyone out in the audience. Is there anything that you think we need to ask in a housing survey?
Okay, one comment on the housing survey in general. It always leaves out the land that is available, or it's classified as commercial for future use, but is currently zoned residential. So we have 18 acres of property that's at the corner of HH and Hoover that's currently all residential. And if you figure it out using the traditional overlay from downtown right there, the tax base is significantly more than it ever would be with commercial buildings there. And we also already have a surplus of vacant commercial space. So if in the future reports, future use isn't always, if it's commercial as a future use, just throwing it out of that report and not including it, include it just to have that data. And same thing vice versa, because that's a lot of information that is very handy to have. I had some I have some elderly, pretty much they were my grandparents here, that lived on Main Street, and then they moved out of their house because they wanted something smaller with less maintenance. They were able to, at that time, there was a fourplex available. They bought that fourplex because they still wanted to own a space. They didn't want to rent, so they were able to get that. There's very, very few fourplexes that are own, like that you can buy. Everything tends to be rentals. So I think that we need to figure out how to get people or investors to build buildings that people can buy instead of renting out. And we've been told also that it is undesirable for investors to build like townhomes downtown on the Shopko lot, something like that, because they can't get financing for doing something like that. But that's how you get more ownership, because you have townhomes, those are people transitioning typically. They're either, and they don't want the yard for maintenance. So if you want to get people out of a home that has a big yard, offering or finding that type of housing could be imperative. And there was one condo that recently went up for sale near, I think, McDill Pond, if I remember right. It either sold for $300,000 or $400,000, and it wasn't on the market for any time at all. So you know that there is demand for condos, and immediately when they go on the market, they're gone. So how can we get different options?
Good evening, Jackie Guthrie, Alder District 2. We're in District 2, if that helps orient you. I live at 2700 Peck Street. I want to echo what Commissioner Rice indicated. I represent a neighborhood with so many folks in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who either live alone or with only one partner in sometimes a 3 to 5 bedroom home with a huge yard, and they regularly express interest in moving to something else, but the lack of stock of something that is both attractive in terms of location and amenities and also affordable seems to be the barrier anecdotally. And I want to know if more actual data, not just anecdotal stories, would inform the development agreements that we lean into in terms of energy as a city. I think it would benefit us to ask, what would you deem affordable? So for someone who does own a 4 or 5 bedroom house that might be great for a growing family that no longer is a good fit for that empty nester, if they're sitting on equity for, one of those 1950s homes, but something with half the floor space and half the number of bedrooms is twice the cost. Boy, is that hard for them to wrap their mind around with a new development. So what is an affordable downsizing? What would they consider? And also, what types of amenities would they want within walking distance that would really make them actually interested in making that transition, to make it economically and socially attractive for them to make that transition? I think that would inform some of the work that we might do as a community. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. City Attorney or Citizen Beverage, I don't know which one it is.
Sounds like an Oscar-winning film from the 30s. So in terms of the actual design of the survey and what data we would be wanting to collect, clearly we're not the first community to ever try to undertake this type of thing. So the notion that it would just be our staff with a whiteboard starting from scratch and our big old brains is just silly. There are off-the-shelf standardized types of formats for this type of thing, most likely scaled by the scale and general region of community that we're in the country. Born out of academics and practical experience and obviously just the planning industry. So I don't expect that we'd be sort of freestyling this type of thing. It's certainly good for us to take as much input as we can about the content of it, but I expect that we would probably not be inventing anything innovative. At least that's not how I would go about it, but that's for y'all to figure out.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that occurred to me when Alder Guthrie was speaking is a question about what is your ideal housing? Right? What are you looking for? Because I think everybody in the room probably has something a little bit different as far as ideal housing. Is it a small single-family home? Is it a medium or large single-family home? Do you like a lot of yard? Not a lot of yard? Close neighbors? I don't want to see anybody ever. Those sorts of options, I think, would be helpful in the survey as well.
Mark Christensen, Elder 1, District 1. Exactly what I've been hearing from constituents are the same exact things that have been coming up. I've had a number of people saying, I like the house I'm in. I'd love to get something smaller, but I'd love a townhome or a condo. If we could have something by the river, something by the parks, I'd sell my house tomorrow and move. And I've heard that multiple times. The problem is, and Alder Guthrie hit the nail on the head, if you selling your 3,000 square foot house gets you the same amount of money as it's going to cost for the 1,500 square foot condo, it's hard to convince yourself sometimes. But I think that would be a really good, and that was one segment of the housing market that was identified in the housing task force too, is we don't have many townhomes or condos, and compared to a lot of communities our size. So if we could have some kind of a question going along those lines, I think it would be interesting to actually get an accurate gauge of that interest.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm going to throw this out here before we go too much further. Anybody who's watching or listening later, you can submit your thoughts and comments, questions to the Community Development Department. Alderperson?
I don't know if this would be applicable here, but something touching, like what Logan said. When I was in grad school, I had a statistics class that had grad students and non-grad students, and we had to do a survey. And we created the questions. We used the university's computer system to call Dane County residents randomly, and then we went through all the questions, and then we had to calculate whether or not we could choose 4 and see if they had a statistical significance. But maybe there's a statistics class or a survey class that would be willing to do something along these lines and administer the survey like we had to do for a grade. And that would take a lot of the trouble off of staff, if that would be a possibility.
Yeah. Good. It reminds me that I read somewhere that 79.2% of statistics are just made up on the spot.
Exactly, yeah.
I saw a hand down here. Pete, is that you?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this, and to Matt's point and the others, that right, how do you get people to move out of their existing house? And right, the challenge of, the new is expensive. You're trading it in for maybe a lesser commodity. But just thinking of the housing that we have approved and maybe coming along, we've done something to establish new housing. We get some apartments that are expensive and some are less expensive perhaps, but probably still too expensive. We got the Forest Creek subdivision going out there that has a variety of housing sizes and lot sizes, and so I think that's good. We got the shop code development where, again, we can focus on some of these things, and I think with the new housing that's going in, that's going to help the housing situation, right? If you increase the supply, demand should come down, prices should come down, and we've started that. We're not very far along, and as other folks have said, it'll take a while to see how these things all shake out and how they really affect things. Of course, there's numerous other things that'll come into play, but I guess wrapping it back around to the question at hand, what do we want the survey to say? I think a good starting is, what's it going to take to get you out of your house?
To answer yours and Commissioner Rice's questions, 2 of the 3 houses I have owned have been in my family, one for 3 generations. Kicking and screaming. is how you're gonna get me out of my house.
Sure.
We use about 1,400, 1,500 square feet of it all year round. And then for that one weekend in April for trivia, we use the other 1,400 square feet. All right, any other last thoughts? Otherwise, we're gonna turn them loose. If anything comes up afterwards, by all means, reach out to staff and let them know.
One thing that I don't think our zoning allows right now, but the Community Development Block Grant Program encourages converting single or large single-family homes into duplexes or condos. So we do have a lot of larger homes that are very expensive for people to keep up. Maybe considering asking, would you be willing to, or would you want to move into like one of the old 6,000 square foot houses if it was condos? Because then you still have that opportunity to have ownership, but then also it's not a giant endeavor. So it's just another price point that could be added. But we'd have to also adjust zoning to allow for converting rooming houses or just big houses that aren't being used into condos.
Okay. All right. This is an ongoing process, so we'll get updates periodically. Next item on the agenda is our director's report. This is a different format, new director, new format. Written report, are there any things you wanted to highlight on?
Nothing substantial. Still working on the Forest Creek subdivision. Land pricing, we're hoping to get that out here and start marketing those beginning of the year. Trying to get that out so people can start planning their build yet this building season. Everything has gone forward with our TIF district number 14. There were some administrative corrections. Those have been submitted. Should all be good to go. We're just waiting on some final correspondence from the state. Do you have a question?
Just a small one. Regarding the Poco Bispark bid, it's now January and contracts will be in play, and I was wondering if the county is still dealing with the contracts for maintenance?
We're working on it.
Okay.
As we speak, we got an update today from our city attorney, or as you know, I'm Citizen Beverage. So yeah, we're still working on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Rosebud. All right, any questions for the director? For those watching and listening, the director's report, written report, is included in the packet. That's available at stevenspoint.com. Our agenda is exhausted, and we are adjourned at 7:37.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.